Welcome back, it's me, Lou. Today we are going to jump into the time machine and travel way back to the year 2000. So back in the year 2000, McFarlane Toys were producing a line of anime-inspired action figures. One of the more popular anime lines that they tapped into was Akira. Akira is a very much beloved anime for a lot of people like me. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, it was kind of like the definitive anime at the time. The production value of the anime was high level. The anime was originally based off of a manga series that was created by Katsuhiro Otomo, and I love the McFarlane action figures. What we're going to look at today are two of the toys that McFarlane made in the year 2000 in the Akira toy line. On the left, we have the much loved motorcycle that was seen in the anime. This thing is very iconic. You might have seen it in the live-action movie Ready Player One, and it's something that, you know, when people think of anime and vehicles, this is always kind of at the top of the list. And it's very awesome, very beautiful. And on our right, we're going to take a look at the action figure Shotaro Kaneda. He's the lead protagonist in the animated Akira animated feature. So we're going to take a look at this also. But before we talk about the figures, let's do a brief rundown on Akira. So, like I mentioned, Akira is based off of a manga, which is the Japanese word for comic books. And what we're looking at right here, this is volume 1 of the collection. This was published by Dark Horse Comics. And if you grew up in the 80s and if you were a comic book reader, you'll remember that the original United States publication, or the original American release of the manga, was published by Epic Comics in the 80s and 90s. Epic Comics was a division of Marvel Comics. Epic was Marvel's way of producing much more mature and adult-themed comic books. And, you know, they happened to adapt Akira for many years. Later, they lost the license to publish the books to Dark Horse, and Dark Horse has a long-running history of producing manga and anime-inspired comic books, and Akira seemed like a perfect fit. And what we have here is the collected volume, number 1. So this was created by Katsuhiro Otomo, and the manga is really different than the anime. The anime is like I think it's like maybe like a 2-hour feature versus the manga, which is multiple volumes, and each volume is thick like a telephone book. So the artwork's beautiful. It's gorgeous, and I don't know, there's just something about this that this really takes me back. I'm kind of cautious about thumbing through this book because the content might be a little bit mature, and I don't want to accidentally stumble upon a page where there's like nudity or violence. And then we have some beautiful imagery here. Alright, this looks great. So, speaking of Akira and the anime, I do have the actual VHS tape somewhere in my house. I just can't find it. The original VHS in the United States was produced by Streamline Pictures. But over the last, I don't know, 20 plus years, it's seen different publishers in terms of the digital media. So, like, in terms of like DVDs and Blu-rays and 4Ks, it's had different publishers. For example, I think this one here was one of the earlier DVDs. This one was produced by Pioneer. If you're like a crazy like cinephile or videophile, you'll remember that Pioneer produced a number of VHS animes and also anime on Laserdisc. And speaking of which, I think I might have Akira on Laserdisc also in my collection. But here was one of the earlier DVDs. Here's the big selling points. New Japanese 5.1 DTS. So I take it back. This might have been a second release. What do we have in here? Now this is me being crazy. We have a huge collection of DVDs, and I know it's kind of archaic because I know a lot of people have moved on from DVDs, but I like having physical media of especially movies and stuff, because especially on streaming services, sometimes some movies and TV shows, they might only be like on Netflix or Amazon, for a short period of time. Sometimes, the movie you like or the TV show might be in limbo and you might not be able to find it. But it's kind of cool for me just to have some of these in, actual physical form. And I'm crazy too, because I always take my DVDs and I sleeve them. I put them in these paper sleeves. I never put them in the actual tray, because over time, depending on how hard this plastic is, it can actually crack the disc, because the discs are actually very fragile towards the center. DVDs actually, if I remember correctly, it's actually two thinned plastic discs pressed together. And I think the most fragile point is actually at the center of the disc. And I just speak from experience, because I actually have had DVDs crack towards the center. And one of the things too with physical media that you have to be careful with, there's no rhyme or reason as to why it happens, but CDs and DVDs, they actually deteriorate and rot. I think it has to do maybe with temperature and maybe exposure to light. But, some people, they'll notice that their DVDs will start to deteriorate. And it's a weird, unexplained phenomena. So here was the insert for this Akira DVD. It's just a chapter listing. Nothing important there. And then some years later, we got this. We got the steel book version of the DVD. Pioneer presents Akira, the special edition. This one's THX. Comes in this cool tin. Yeah, the capsule logo. If you remember the capsules, it's the gang that Kaneda belongs to right there. You see the capsule logo on his back. And this one's a little bit more premium. You have two discs here. Disc 1 is the special edition. Disc 2, I think maybe is the bonus features. And then here's the insert. Oh, this is pretty cool. So, like I was talking about, McFarlane, they're producing anime figures during the early 2000s. Here's actually a insert advertising some of the McFarlane's action figures at the time. Go to spawn.com, McFarlane Toys. And on the back, here's Akira. So we're going to talk about this in a little bit, but what's interesting with this version here is that the motorcycle was actually released twice. So the initial release saw the motorcycle packaged by itself with no figure on a blister and card. It was not on a box. It was packaged like a standard action figure. Kaneda here was also packaged on a blister and card, much like the motorcycle. Now the biggest complaint is that when this figure and this bike was released, is that the motorcycle was strictly a display piece. You could not seat Kaneda in the bike. This is pretty much a very small statue. He's not articulated in any way that allows him to sit down on the motorcycle. So it was, I'm not sure if it was a premeditated plan, like they knew eventually they'd re-release this twice, or if it was more so just listening to the fans complain. But eventually McFarlane offered a box set, which included both the motorcycle and a version of Kaneda that could be seated in the motorcycle. Now, this figure was not super articulated like action figures today. If you look at it, his leg is straight-legged, and I believe the knee doesn't even bend. So it was just kind of a weird thing. But yeah, here's some of the other properties McFarlane was working on with their anime figures. They had Akira, Ghost in the Shell, Trigun, Armitage the Third, Soul Taker, and Tenchi Myo. All very popular animes during the 90s. And much like today, McFarlane, they're still doing anime action figures, like with Seven Deadly Sins, My Hero Academia. So, they have a long running history in the world of anime. And then lastly, we come to this. I believe I bought this recently. I might have bought this during the pandemic. This came out not too long ago. This is the, if I could get it out, this is the 4K ultra high definition version of Akira. And as you can see here, beautiful artwork. We have Kaneda and his motorcycle. Much like this one, this pops open. You kind of recreate that image here. And this one's multi-disc. You have the Blu-ray. You have the bonus Blu-ray, and then you have the 4K resolution version of the movie right here. Very cool. And then it comes with this nice little booklet. It talks about Akira. I think it's more so about the history of the anime, not necessarily the story. Yeah, they talk about the print format of the original movie, 35 millimeter, 70 millimeter. They go into a little bit of the production. Yeah, so this is a kind of a cool history piece. I know nowadays people don't really buy DVDs and Blu-rays, but if you're a collector or if you're just a big fan about Akira and all things anime, this is kind of a nice piece to have. It kind of documents the history of this very groundbreaking piece of animation. Akira's a big deal. It's not just a big deal in the anime world, but this overall, the world of animation, it's a very important piece. So yeah, that's that. Pretty cool. Alright, so let's start talking about action figures. It's why you're here. It's why I'm here also, so. And get this back in here, if it'll fit. There we go. Okay, so we have Kaneda's motorcycle, and we have Shotaro Kaneda himself. First off, let's take a look at the motorcycle. So here is Kaneda's motorcycle. If you're curious about the dimensions of these figures and vehicles, let's pull out the ruler real quick. The motorcycle, I'm going to say, is probably about 10 inches, if I had to guess. And I'd be somewhat right. It's almost 10.5 inches long. Kaneda, I think, might be borderline 7 inches tall, I think. Yeah, he's a little bit under 7. I think about a little over 6 3/4. But the bike is awesome. So it's not completely accurate to what's seen in the anime. Kaneda's motorcycle has a lot of stickers placed throughout the bike, on the fairing and on the fork. So they had to change some of the logos. So in the anime, right here where it says corrupt, it's actually the Canon logo. And when I say Canon, I mean Canon, and that's Canon, the film company, the company that produces cameras and whatnot. There's kind of the Air Force sticker, which I think is on the original anime motorcycle also. And I think, paying homage to this bike, if you play the game Cyberpunk 2077, the motorcycle in that, I think it carries over this sticker also. Immigrant, I think, was on the original design. So yeah, here's a profile shot of Kaneda's motorcycle. Here's a rear view shot. The tires are actually rubber, so if you've actually held this in your hand, it's kind of a harder rubber. There's no tread on it. It's a completely smooth surface. Since it's rubber, I think one thing you might have to worry about is dry rot. But I think if you keep this in cooler temperatures, you don't have to necessarily worry about the tires deteriorating and cracking. Here's a front view, other profile. And if you look closely enough, they did highlight some of the details. There's a nice panel lining throughout the vehicle. So some of the recesses are darkened in with a wash and black ink. The wheels do spin. And since this is more so a display piece than an actual toy, it does feature a kickstand. So you could prop the kickstand up so you could, stand it properly on your table or desk like that. The front of the bike is actually articulated. You can lift the fairing up like this, and it kind of reveals the inside, which is incredibly detailed. As you can see, it's painted black, but it has a silver dry brush effect to it, so it kind of really brings out the edges and highlights. Here's the handlebar with the heads-up display. It would be nice, because I want to say this is not accurate to the anime. I might be wrong on that, though, because there's a scene early on when Kaneda is talking about, finally getting the coil in the green, and he's talking about when he's speeding up. So it'd be nice if they actually had that graphic on the heads-up display. And up next, we have the main protagonist of the film. This is Shotaro Kaneda. And this is a beautiful, beautiful action figure. Now, the bike and this action figure is something I've kept consistently on display during the last almost 23 years. Ever since the first day I bought this action figure. This will always be displayed somewhere in my house. Unlike, most of my other toys, eventually everything gets boxed up and stored somewhere. Sometimes stuff gets shuffled around. Sometimes things get boxed up and taken out again. And, sometimes I like to cycle my display and my collection. But this is like one of the few action figures in all of my collection, whether it be Star Wars, Transformers, G.I. Joe, whatever. This guy and the bike, they're always going to be on display somewhere, whether it's in my entertainment center or on top of my computer. These are beautiful, beautiful action figures. But, I use the term action very, very loosely because, I've said this many times in my previous videos, especially with toys that came out during the 90s. This is really much more of a small statue, slash display piece. The articulation on this, very limited. I'm kind of worried to try articulating them because it's been so long that I don't know how fragile some of these pieces are. So I don't want to actually twist something and have something break off. Already, just the other day, just by handling them, the glue that held the straps together kind of wore off, and some of the straps kind of broke apart. They didn't break, but they kind of disassembled, so I had to reglue some of the pieces back together. But otherwise, beautiful action figure. The paint job on this is outstanding. Very rarely do you see action figures with this kind of detail, and it's awesome. I mean, in addition to all the subtle detailing, there's an ink wash going on. There's a lot of weathering. It looks like a very, very sophisticated toy, and it's just beautiful. I like this guy a lot. It's awesome. So we have Kaneda here. He's outfitted with his Arasaka HLR-12X, which is his gun here. HLR actually stands for Heavy Laser Rifle. And it's attached to his battery pack, which he has slung over his shoulder right there. As I pointed out, he has the capsule logo on his back. It's accurate to the anime, but I'm not sure about the colors, because the colors here is for the pill is yellow and blue, whereas in certain depictions it's red and blue, and in others it's white and blue. Depending on what you refer to in terms of the reference material, sometimes there's even a logo that kind of encircles the capsule. But for the most part, you know, for what you're getting on the action figure, it's good enough. It looks awesome. He comes with a pair of goggles, which you could sling around his face, but you know, the plastic material, it's very fragile, especially over 20 years. You know, if I attempted to stretch this, it might actually crack. So I'm just going to leave this alone. Let's take a look at him up close. Beautiful sculpting. You know, keep in mind this figure came out in the year 2000. The attention to detail is amazing. You have this beautiful like micro texture along the straps and harnesses. Wonderful details throughout the coat. Realistic folds and wrinkles on the pants. He kind of has those like oven mitt gloves. I think one inaccuracy, I got to double check, but I think the rifle is colored wrong. I want to say that in the anime, the rifle might actually be black, not silver. Unless in the anime, it's black with silver highlights, which I can understand why they would opt for a silver gun here instead. But, you know, I don't think anyone's going to be that picky about it. There's a wire that connects the rifle to the battery pack, and it threads through his hand right there. I believe there's articulation here at the thighs. I think they could twist, or they do right here. So you can kind of adjust the pose so it'll stand properly. It makes no sense to me why this, is what it is. It's a very monoposed action figure. So, in reality, they should have just lost the cut and just like left it permanently into position, which best suits the character to allow it to stand. Wonderful boots, and there's actually peg holes in the feet too. I don't remember if the figure came with a stand, but in order to stand my action figures to be on the safe side so it doesn't fall off the shelf, I use these third-party stands right here. These, I think, were made originally for the old school G.I. Joes from the 80s. Yeah, so these display stands are from smalljoes.com. The foot peg here is made for an original G.I. Joe figure from the early 80s, but it happens to be the same dimensions as the foot peg here. So what I do is I just, prop a stand on each foot, so it gives them greater surface area. So like when I stand them on my shelf, I don't have to worry about him tipping over. There's a bigger footprint. So, and like I said, you have to adjust the legs kind of correctly so he stands just right. If you have it off by a little, he's going to tip over. You see this movement. If I move it inward, he's going to fall forward. So you have to get him in the right proper stance. So, like I said earlier, this was a wonderful action figure, but it was unfortunate that this figure lacked the articulation to actually seat him properly on the motorcycle. Eventually, maybe months later or maybe a year later, we got the box set, which featured the motorcycle and also a new version of Kaneda that was kind of in a seated pose, so it could actually fit him on the bike. McFarlane, much later, they produced, I think, another wave or two of Akira action figures, but those designs, I think, were based more so off of the manga and not the anime. Alright, so let's wrap this one up. This video is running a little long, but for me, it was a nice trip down memory lane. If you grew up during the 80s and 90s, or if you're an anime fan, or if Akira is your jam, I hope you found something insightful about this video. So wrapping this up, once again, my name is Lou. If you are new to my channel, welcome. If you are a returning viewer or subscriber, thank you so much for your continued support. I greatly appreciate it. So until the next video, be safe, take care of yourself, buy lots of toys, and most importantly, be happy. And I will see you at the next one. Alright, later.